partnerships and programs at Kinfolk Tech, and just so excited for this amazing program that we are going to have this evening. Can everybody hear me? I'm seeing somebody saying mute, so I want to make sure. Okay. All right. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the confirmation. So my name is Raven, like I said, and so excited for this evening's program, kicking off a series of teach-ins that Kinfolk Tech is doing in honor of this year's 250th anniversary of America. And I'll say a little bit more about that in just a few. We can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. If you're new, Kinfolk Tech is an organization that is bringing place-based stories to light, weaving together immersive technology, community-centered design to create a new commemorative model, one where communities shape what is remembered and public space becomes a canvas for truth, imagination, and belonging. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, this year we are acknowledging the history that is America. It is the 250th anniversary, and we are bringing a counter narrative to the national narrative that we will hear a lot about over this year and the next few years, I'm sure. And so this series of teach-ins and our programming over the next couple of years is an invitation to artists, storytellers, archivists, anyone who feels called to respond to our invitation to be a part of telling our own stories, of archiving our stories. Ultimately, we cannot be erased, and we want to ensure that that is the case by continuing to have spaces like this and to preserve a living archive of our stories. Next slide, please. And so we are honored to also have a partner on this program, which is the Haiti Cultural Exchange. And so I'd love to pass it over to Cassandra to say a few words about their work.
Thank you, Raven. Hello, everyone. My name is Cassandra Khalil. I'm the program director here at Haiti Cultural Exchange. As Raven said, one of the collaborators for tonight. We're based in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, but serve New York City, citywide, and the diaspora at large. Haiti Cultural Exchange is a nonprofit organization established to present, promote, and develop the expressions of the Haitian people. We were founded in 2009 by a group of Haitian women with a central call to create a permanent presence for Haitian arts and culture in our city. We do so through a mix of creative platforms ranging from performance presentations to residencies, exhibitions, and knowledge sharing year-round. At HCX, we love Black people for many, many reasons. A leading one is quite simply that we are Black people. We're in love with our culture, with our history, with our families, with our kin. We know today more than ever that love is political. Bell Hooks describes love ethic as an awareness that provokes action and sets conditions for freedom that's recognized within oneself, but also to build corrected and new systems with others. These conditions for freedom mean that we need truth, right? Especially about our history. Thinking about Michel Rothtriot and his idea of science in the past, we need to resist that and insist that our dignity and care is essential. Reflecting on and learning about legacies of freedom, like the Haitian Revolution, through conversations like tonight, make visible the interlocking ways that our present is informed by blue hot flashes of our ancestors' demands, the successes of and the challenges to building new and renewed visions for liberation. At HCX, there's nothing more important to our right for freedom and a shared future, and one that is grounded in truth, love, and creative expression. I want to thank all of the panelists tonight and Kinfolk Tech for allowing HCX to join in on this conversation, and really look forward to it.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. Thank you for being a partner on this program as well. And so want to ground us in the focus of today's teach-in session. This session is inspired by Haitian revolutionary Toussaint L'Ouverture. And pictured here is Kinfolk's monument to L'Ouverture, pictured in the Columbus Circle in New York in place of Christopher Columbus, which is really symbolic of the work that we do at Kinfolk. Toussaint L'Ouverture was born enslaved, fought for emancipation and freedom, and died before fully realized. His story is one of bondage, freedom, bravery, and abandonment. It is a monument to the inevitability of independence. The journey from an enslaved man to the leader of the only successful slave revolt in modern history was not an easy one. Still, it highlights the traits that make Toussaint L'Ouverture one of the most important figures in all of history. Next slide, please. What also brings us together for this session, I'll avoid saying this evening since we're coming from so many different time zones, is our frameworks of zones of imagination, which inform all of our programs. And so they are memory justice, digital justice, collective power, reparations, and radical futures. And for today's session, we really aim to uplift memory justice, to reclaim the history, legacy, and memory of not only L'Ouverture, but Haiti in its own right. Next slide, please. And so also want to take a moment to acknowledge not just the history, but our current moment in relationship to Haiti. And so we gather in the spirit of those who dared to imagine freedom before the world was ready. This teach-in takes place on stolen indigenous land, and we honor the ongoing resistance of all peoples who have never stopped fighting for sovereignty. We acknowledge that Haitian people who gave the world its first Black Republic are today under attack. In 2026, Haitians in the U.S. face political targeting, mass deportation, and the weaponization of racist myths to justify their removal. In Haiti, the legacy of colonialism, U.S. occupation, extractive debt, and the deliberate destabilization of sovereignty continues to drive crisis, displacement, and violence. To study the Haitian Revolution is to confront this continuity. The same forces that feared Haiti in 1804 fear Black and brown liberation today. We reclaim this history as an act of resistance and dedicate this space to those still fighting for freedom Haiti proved was possible. So thank you all again for being here, and so excited for the folks who are going to continue this statement forward. I do just want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we jump in. There will be time at the end for Q&A, but please feel free to use the chat for sharing resources, for asking questions. We will get to those after the questions portion of today. And I'll also say that we will have a Q&A button, so you'll be able to use that as well. And then lastly, just a reminder that Kinfolk Tech is a nonprofit. We strive to bring free programming to the public, and so please stick around at the end of this program for ways that you can continue to support our programming to remain free and open to everyone. And so with all of that said, I would like to now bring to the virtual stage our panelists. So we have with us this evening artist Tasha Dougé, Dr. Jessica Marie Johnson, filmmaker Alain, and then we also have artist Dred Scott. If you all will turn on your cameras and we can take down this slide. And so we're just going to give each of our panelists a moment to just introduce themselves. You've seen their very robust bios, which brought you to this conversation, but wanted to leave a little space for them to speak to their practice before we jump into the questions. And so maybe we start with Tasha, if you'd like to give us a little bit of an overview about your practice.
Sure. Bonsoir tout le monde. Hello, everybody. So this first image that you see here is a still that was taken for a short video that I was doing before my travels to Germany to exhibit in the Hygiene Museum in Dresden, Germany, for an exhibition that was talking about the inception of the races. And I chose this photo primarily to speak to that my practice is very much ancestral. I feel very much tied to spirits as they are the ones that really are guiding me along my practice. So I wanted to start here. Next slide. This piece, because I am a multidisciplinary conceptual artist, I do repurpose materials. I wanted to illuminate this piece, which is called The Broken Hands of Time, which was brought to fruition at the onset of the pandemic. You know, a lot of things were shutting down, and where I was currently working, there was still an ask for artists to do work. which I found to be quite frustrating among many other sentiments. And so, interestingly enough, my sister had just asked me, well, what are you going to do with this lantern? Like, why do you got this lantern? And I'm like, you're a hoarder. I'm like, I'm not a hoarder. I am a collector of things that will be used at a later time. And that is it. And voila, the lantern became really an opportunity to speak to the ways in which time is used as an agent for capitalism. So you'll see the image on the right-hand side where I ripped up real currency and mixed it with fake currency and to really speak to that experience. But then on the other side of the lantern, you'll see what it would look like to return to a cyclical and African perspective when it comes to time. Hence the gold going beyond the borders, really coming out of the structure as opposed to being contained in the structure. And so that is Broken Hand of Time. There's a video of it that's on YouTube that I'll put in the link later. Next slide. So starting 2022, I took on the practice of photography. And in this work, this one is called Traces. And I initially just wanted to capture a moment, an archive of folks who had walked through the space as we were taking tintypes by one of my colleagues, Sarah. But then there was this inclination to bring nature inside as well. So a part of my practice is also to speak to the internal and the external, the world and environment that we live in and bringing nature into that conversation. But this work was actually shown at an exhibition, We Are Here, of all Haitian artists that was curated by Ibna Despang. And what was really interesting is that this work then became almost a metaphor of the Haitian experience. That while we've been trampled many a time, that we will still be vibrant and we will still be prominent and we will still survive. And I was just like, oh, wasn't thinking that, but receive it. So that then became something that I hold dear to me, in that we will never be quelled as our history rings true. Next slide. So this is a still from an offering that I did at Asbury Park. I believe it was 2024, if I'm not mistaken. This offering, and I don't use the word performance as when it specifically relates to Black people. There's nothing performative around our experiences. So when I do something around that, I either say an offering or a ritual. So I just extract that from my vocabulary. So in this still, you see me emerging from the water as I was paying homage to Reverend James Francis Robinson, who protested segregation in Asbury Park, New Jersey, in the 1800s, which was wait-ins that predated actual sit-ins, which I thought was amazing. Next slide. So here, if anyone who's watching, I would encourage them to take a screenshot. In this still, you will see what looks like a negative of Reverend James Francis Robinson. But when you use the accessibility tool or invert the image, it brings the past into the future. So that was my way to use technology that we have access to make the past very much present. Yes, next slide. And that's just another still because there was a procession into the water. Next slide. And this is one of the pieces that I'm most notable for. This flag, her name is Justice, braided out of synthetic hair, stitched to chicken wire, and the cotton balls are replaced the stars of the American flag. And so this work really is to speak to not only the African American contribution to this land, but also Haitian. You can go to the next slide. That's me, the anniversary of the March on Washington. So she has traveled. Next slide. And lastly, this is the rebirth of justice, using synthetic as well as natural fibers and replacing the stars with actual pieces of cotton with their seeds. Next slide. Oh, okay. And this is the Revolution Bowl. I'll stop here. I can speak more to that when we do our Q&A.
Also, thank you so much,
Thank
Tasha.
y'all.
Already setting the stage so beautifully. I want to pass it over to Dr. Johnson to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. It is really great to be here. Let me know, somebody flag me down if you cannot hear me. Tasha, thank you for setting us up that way. That is so beautiful. I'm so excited to be able to experience everybody's offerings on this day. Happy Mardi Gras, happy all the things. If you follow various stars and spiritual occurrences, it's popping today. And so hopefully everybody is getting their water and their candles lit and all of that. I am a trained historian, but I describe myself as more than a historian. I'm a writer. I'm building an art practice. I am a mother. I'm a teacher. I'm a mentor. And I say that because in thinking about what the past means and how I approach it and how I understand it, I do believe it suffuses all that we do as Africans, as descendants of a broad and deep diaspora, as descendants of a diaspora with incredible revolutions like the ones we're speaking about today, and also incredible grief. I think that some of the ways that we have understood intrinsically the histories of slavery, we come to it as histories of freedom, as histories of revolt, as histories of rebellion and revolution. And for me, thinking about those and how that resonates in the documents and how we can bring that past that is in documents into our everyday lives more and more, but also how can we appreciate the ways that we understand the past and talk about the past around our kitchen tables. I'm sorry, I got a little hitch in my throat. Around our kitchen tables, in the ways that we have come to history and the past as part of our families, part of our genealogies, in the ways we come to history and the past as our origin stories, and as the stories that we tell, both multitudinous and also singular, about where we've come from and how we got here. And this is why I think talking about Haiti today, I think is so important. For me, this also means coming to the understanding of what Haiti is and its contribution to the world. Is also about having a kinship and a solidarity across diasporas and across the Caribbean, across our shared struggles, our shared struggle against settler colonialism, our shared struggle against empire, particularly U.S. empire, if I can say that, if it's not censored, are we in a safe space? If we're in a safe space here, and our shared struggle to understand how we relate to each other, to our African heritage, and to our heritage that is created and recreated over and over and over in, what some have called the New World. We can describe it as the next world. For me, again, this is a kinship practice, and it's also a practice of scholarship and engagement with ideas and with knowledge and with sources that I take so incredibly serious. And this is really important to think about in this present moment. We have seen this happen before, but we're seeing our databases be destroyed. We're seeing funding dry up for all kinds of projects, artistic, research related, teaching related. Libraries are institutions. Black institutions have long felt this first. White people are now feeling it. I think we need to be very, very careful about how we shepherd and protect our histories of revolt and revolution, of which Haiti is such a central story. We know what happens when, in the moment of 1791, 1794, 1803, and 1804, a history of revolt and revolution is literally being disappeared from the newspapers, disappeared from public conversation, silenced in discourse. We know what happens. We know what that struggle means, and we know that that's deliberate and on purpose. We also know what happens when that silencing and that anti-Blackness of that silencing resonates across other Caribbean nations, resonates across the broader Latin American region. We know the ways that Haiti and Haitians have been seen as the all of the negative things in many other countries surrounding it. I can very much speak for Puerto Rico and the way that that kind of anti-Haitian, anti-Black attitude is so virulent and so violent. We know we see that in the kinds of solidarities that are being forged across DR and Haiti. And so we need to be very, very, very present with these moments of deep, deep, deep Black African solidarity, because that's what the 1791 revolt was, and really try and learn from it. And we can learn from it from documents. We can learn from it from these conversations. We can learn from it from our stories. In the last couple of seconds that I have, I really want to, because for me, scholarship, research, history, thinking about the past is a kinship practice. I really want to just name some of the amazing folks who I have learned from in this work, because I do think that that's important. Folks who are thinking broadly across Haiti and Francophone Caribbean world: Marina Dahl, Kayama Glover, Ginatina Ulysse, Crystal Edens, Elouise Nandica, of course, legend, Odette Ferli, Marie Conde, Ibae, Marivaux Chavet, Ibae, Jean Casimir. So many folks have taught us and continue to teach us what Haiti means. And that is just spreading in these really beautiful ways. In March, I and other amazing folks will be at La Cumbre in Puerto Rico, talking again about how central Haiti is to the struggle of folks in the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, the Portuguese-speaking, the Brazil, everywhere, because this is where we need to be thinking about how we come together, and also in this moment especially, how we revolt. So thank you.
Ooh, stage is on fire already. Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. I want to pass it over to Dred Scott.
Okay, well, this is a great place to start. I love being on a panel where somebody says we need to start thinking about how to revolt, and mentions revolution a lot in their talk. So thank you for that. I am a visual artist. My work shows primarily in galleries and museums, but I also show on street corners with and without permission. This is a project called Imagine a World Without America. It is just a screen print. It's basically a painting, and largely I'm showing you to say, hey, I do work in canvases, and some of this work imagines a world without America. Next slide, please. This is a project that's an old project from 1988, became the center of national controversy in 1989. It's a project called What is the Proper Way to Display a U.S. Flag? It's an installation for audience participation. There's a photo montage on the wall, which I'll show you a detail of in a second. That photo montage has text that says, what's the proper way to display a U.S. flag? And images of South Korean students burning American flags, holding signs that say, Yankee, go home, son of a bitch. And then their flag-draped coffins below that, draped in the American flag. Below that is a shelf that has books on it that people can write responses to that question, and below that is a 3x5 foot American flag, which people have the option of standing on as they write their responses. Next slide, please. And so this is just a detail of the photo montage. And next slide, please. And this is just showing that somebody can stand next to it, or they can stand on the flag as they write their responses. Next slide. And it got to the point where George Herbert Walker Bush, who was the president of the United States, called the work disgraceful, which I thought was a tremendous honor when I was a young 24-year-old undergraduate art student, and I still think it's one of the highest honors I've ever received. Next slide. This is a project called Slave Rebellion Reenactment, which is a project that I want to spend most of the time on. It is a community-engaged performance. And it reenacted the largest rebellion of enslaved people in the history of the United States. That rebellion happened in 1811 outside of New Orleans, and it is directly tied to Haiti. We can talk more about what those relationships are, but mostly I just want to talk about the project. When I say it's a community engaged project, it was a project that had over 350 reenactors, and we marched for 24 miles over the course of 2 days. But it was community engaged, so I didn't just hire a bunch of actors or talk to a bunch of professional reenactors. I actually had to go spend many years actually talking with people, having lunches and dinners with them, and getting people in the New Orleans area both permission to do the work, but also win them to wanting to participate in it. And so it was really a lot of dinners and lunches and conversations. Next slide, please. And we actually studied Haiti because we wanted to actually get the costumes correct. And most times if people thought about what did enslaved people wear, they would say, oh, burlap sacks. And yes, enslaved people were given relatively inexpensive clothing, but it wasn't just everybody dressed in uniform burlap sacks. And if you look at some of the artwork and lithographs from Saint-Domingue and other of the Francophone Atlantic world, but also the broader Atlantic world, you see people men with turbans, you see striped clothing and things like that. And so we wanted to get the costuming correct, and that's what we were looking at as original source material from the time. Next slide, please. We had a costume department. They drew up designs based on that. Next slide. And then people made costumes. Some people made their own costumes. We had sewing circles because it really was a community-involved project. We would use that as a way to actually meet part of the community. The woman on the left was part of our costume department. The man on the right just learned to sew that day and was making his own costume. Next slide. We had to design flags. We knew that the people that were marching in this rebellion carried flags. We know that the size of the army that they were in because the general at the time, General Wade Hampton, wrote to the governor, Governor Claiborne, and said there are 500 brigands in the field. They're marching in formation under flags, but they didn't describe the flags. We knew they would not have been American flags or French flags, and so I, as a visual artist, had to imagine what they might have been. This is unlikely to have been an actual flag, but this is an adinkra, which is a Ghanaian symbol, but it means hope and hope and confidence. Next slide, please. And this is a Louisiana Creole. It's not misspelled French. It is Louisiana Creole, which would have been the lingua franca at the time. Next slide. And so we had practice. We actually had to learn how to walk like an army. As I said, there were 500 people in the original, and in this we had 350 people, but we wanted to not just look like people having a demonstration or people going from a stroll. We actually wanted to look like an army. And so we had to practice, even though this was a performance, a live art visual performance. And so we didn't have one gathering where everybody was doing. We had groups of people that were learning how to walk and exude militancy. Next slide, please. And this is what the whole project looked like. I'm going to show you 6 performance stills that were stills that people would have, images that they would have seen if they saw the performance live. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. And I want to pause on this for a second because one of the things with reenactment, the main reenactment tradition in the United States is Civil War reenactment, but in almost all reenactment, they try and take the audience back in time and they find sort of a bucolic setting that doesn't have any modern day things in it. And it's like the audience goes back in time to imagine what things were like, say, in the Civil War, like in 1863. This is exactly what it would have been like. And the reenactors get all the troop movements right. They get the costuming correct and stuff, but they get the main question of the Civil War wrong. It's a Southern tradition, and most reenactors think the South were the good guys, and if they just reenact it one more time, they'll win. And so I was interested as a visual artist in this clash between the past and the present. So instead of taking the audience back in time, I brought an army of the enslaved out of 1811 to march through modern day Louisiana on the outskirts of New Orleans. And so this is an image that it's not that I couldn't find a bucolic setting where there wouldn't be the modern. I wanted to actually have this army of the enslaved marching past oil refineries, strip malls, gated communities. And so in all of the images, you will see modern things. And this particular oil refinery is actually put down on the graves of enslaved people. Next slide. Next slide. And this is just a video, 30-second video of what it would look like.
On to New Orleans! Freedom or death! We're gonna end slavery! Join us! Join us!
Okay, and I will just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trent. And last but not least, Alain Martin.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Alain Martin. I'm a writer and director of The Forgotten Occupation, Jim Crow Goes to Haiti. It is a personal meditation on the U.S. occupation of Haiti from 1915 to 1934. This project, I call it a personal meditation because although it is about history, but it is also a reaction to my childhood. So real quick, I grew up in this small town called Jacmel in the south of Haiti. And we didn't have, CNNs or HBO. So we used to watch imported American films. So Commando, Rambo. Our idea of America came to those movies, right? I can still remember seeing Superman telling Lois Lane, I'm here to fight for truth, justice, and the American way. So that was always our idea of America. Now, mind you, all these movies just had white heroes. So, to me and my friends and my family members, America was always the land of righteousness. It was always, the people you turn to in moments of distress, right? And I really believe that. So much so that I remember in 1994 when the Americans invaded Haiti for the second time, I was a teenager. I was really elated because for me, these were the action heroes on my television screen coming to rescue Haiti. Fast forward, I come to the US as a teenager and I end up reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I cannot tell you how much that shocked me, right? Because there's a line, I believe, in the book on Malcolm X called The White Man, the Devil. And you need to understand how unsettling this was to me, right, who grew up watching, Rambo, Commando, to hear a Black person call the white man the devil. Long story short, this was my, introduction to the darker side of American history, all right? So now years later, that's when I learned about, Jim Crow and slavery and what happened to African Americans in this country. So years later, when I learned about the US occupation of Haiti, the first question that came to mind, because it was 1915, was if white Americans were treating their own fellow Black citizens here, right, with so much disdain and lack of humanity, how would they treat a Black people in a different land, different language, different religion? So, I dove deep, and the stuff that I found shocked me so much that, I felt like, I needed to turn this into a project, right? And it took about 12 years to get here. The film was released today, so please check it out. It's on Apple, it's on Google. And I want to talk about, memory. A lot of people don't know about the occupation, right? And the people who do know about it, when I spoke with them, they misremember the occupation, and that they were talking about the occupation in the same way the Americans talked about the occupation. So all these great things, we did for Haiti, right? We built roads, we built hospitals, and blah, blah, blah. And, none of that was true, right? So I just thought it was interesting how we've inherited the colonizers' history of ourselves, their perception of us, And another thing that I want to share, and again, talking about memory, because I know one of the slides mentioned, digital justice, is how, so someone asked me after he saw the film, right? Say, Alan, man, how'd you get all those archival images, those photographs? Where'd you go to get them? And so I told him, I had to go to the National Archives and the Schwarzman Building, the Chronicle Museum in Virginia. And then he said that in Creole. He was like, damn, even your own history, you have to go to the colonizers' archival houses to retrieve your own stuff, right? And I thought that was fascinating because I didn't think about that before. And I'll give an anecdote. So one of the main principles of the US occupation who was fighting against it was Charlemagne Péralte, who's a main character in my film. And the men who assassinated him, John H. Russell, who authorized his assassination, his personal collection has the papers of Charlemagne Péralte, right? So again, our own history, it felt to me when I was working on this film, our own history was colonized, right? And you have to go somewhere else to get it. So, I thought it was fascinating, and it took 12 years. Here I am now. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all. It's just such a tremendous honor to have this group of people together in this space at one time for this conversation. So I'm just so excited to kick things off finally. You've already dug into so much. And so, just for the first question, I just want to get right into it. You all are here with different degrees of relationship and strategies within Toussaint L'Ouverture's vision of universal liberation. And so, I want to ask, how has Haiti's example shaped your understanding and approach to your work on freedom movements today? And what can we learn from specifically his strategies of armed resistance, diplomatic maneuvering, and coalition building that remain relevant to contemporary struggles? So we're going to put that in the chat. I know that's a big question, but I would love whoever to kick us off.
Am I going first? Okay. I feel like it's complicated. I'll just speak from the eye. In growing up Haitian, the revolution was a very simple story, ironically, right? We won, we eat soup moon, and then it's Flag Day. Maybe that's it. I was like, okay. I found for me that my pride in being a Haitian woman was very much superficial. And it was once I became an artist that no, let me not say that. My inquiries started to we started to ask questions as I was getting older, but very much not being able to fully source that from my parents, and seeing that how the assimilation to the American dream kind of created that distance. Now, my parents are both proud of being Haitian and at the same time understood what the stigma would be like when they were here. So, so much to say that I ended up going back to Haiti with my sister and not my parents. So when it comes to learning the history, and I've seen more of Haiti than my parents, which is also ironic. But in coming to the history, when I found out about Toussaint L'Ouverture as one of our forefathers, that was okay, great. But it was almost that he was elevated to a level, and I didn't hear about anybody else, right? I didn't hear about the women that fought in the revolution as well, like Sanit Bener, and then also not hearing about Cécile Fatima, who really corralled the folks in order to have the voodoo ceremony with Bookman, right? So there were so many nuances that were not provided to me to be anchored in this revolution story that it almost felt on quicksand. And when you further, yes, was Toussaint prominent in this conversation and this experiment, not experiment, the slavery was an experiment, but in this pushback against slavery, what I find is the contention. When you read the Constitution of 1801, it states that you want it to be free and French. Very complicated. It's not until you get to Dessalines was like, oh no, we free and Black. And so I had to contend with what does that mean in these fights for liberation and revolution. What are the ways in which, like Alan was talking about, we've internalized some of the things from our oppressors? And I was grateful for Professor Bayana Bello, who, that's what I'm talking about, Alexandra. I was just bringing her up. She offered some clarity for me in that when we speak about Haitian deities, our Loas, Toussaint L'Ouverture was a Legba, right? And in him being a Legba, he was someone that was just supposed to open the path, and folks like Dessalines were to finish the job. And so I just wanted to offer that in the context of when we're doing these excavations of the history, really trying to put the pieces and also the complexities of the people that we lean into as our forefathers.
I mean, I think that, part of what you were touching on is that it's, revolutions are not just made by singular individuals. And beyond the complexity, it actually is a mass movement. And, if it's not a mass movement, it's a coup of a few people. But the Haitian Revolution was actually a revolution. And, there were various leaders. Louverture, as I'm not a historian, I'm a visual artist. And so I will say that, there are historians present and they can actually say more about the history, but in my understanding, Louverture and Dessalines and others actually sort of had a understanding that enabled all sorts of people to fight and give everything to get free of French colonialism and occupation. And that lesson is something that very much has inspired me both in my life, but also for this particular project, Slave Rebellion Reenactment, because one of the thing was that the only way, I mean, Louverture and the Haitians, realized that the only way they could get free was to actually overthrow the system of slavery, which in that case meant beating the most powerful military in the world at the time. It meant driving them off of their land. And there were certain strategic advantages that they had because it was their land and they knew the hills and the mountains and stuff. But it was not just that. That was a crazy plan that everybody had said, you can't do that. There have been other attempts at slave revolts and they got put down. And they said, no, we both need to do this and we can do this. It's possible. And when I did Slave Rebellion Reenactment, that was also the vision that the people who led that revolt, they had. And that was something that was not, they were not trying to form a super PAC and try and get people to be whipped a few less times during the week or something like that. They were like, no, the only way we can get free is to overthrow the system of enslavement. And that's going to be hard. That's going to be very difficult. Some of us have heard about Haiti. Some of us may have been in Haiti in 1811 said we can do that in what at the time was, French colonial, but then owned by the United States. But it was, it was New Orleans. And so they came up with this risky plan not to just individually escape, not to escape collectively with a few people and become Maroons. They said, we want to seize all of Orleans territory and set up an African republic in, the New World. And that would have outlawed slavery. It was the most radical understanding of freedom and emancipation in what was the United States at the time. I mean, the founding fathers, their idea of freedom involved owning people. And so it was not actually that liberating, but the people that were enslaved had this radical vision of how to get free. And that is something that I think is really important. And so in my work, a lot of the work looks at both how the past sets the stage for the present, but how it exists and resides in the present in new form. And so bringing this army of the enslaved, this liberating army and this history out of the past into our present actually has a lot of lessons that people in the present can learn about how do people get free, because so many people had written out the possibility of radical change. They're like, well, maybe we can get one more Democrat into the Senate or something like that. And that was not how Louverture and Dessalines approached it. It was not how Charles Delande, who was one of the key leaders of the revolt in 1811, approached it. And so that lesson is something that I was really trying to both learn from and pose to the people in the present. What lessons can we actually learn from people who had an understanding that, what's the problem? Slavery. What's the solution? Overthrow the system of enslavement. What are those lessons? How do we apply that today? And including not writing out the question of armed struggle off of the agenda, because that was not easy in 18. It wasn't easy in 1791. It wasn't easy in 1811, and it's not going to be easy anywhere else because you're going up against an entrenched state power, and that's hard. But it is possible, and that's one of the things we can learn from Haiti.
I'd like to add the solidarity aspect to that because, I don't think a lot of people know after the Haitian Revolution, right, Haiti made it a point that any Black person or any person that escaped slavery and made it to Haiti, you become a Haitian citizen and you get free land, right? And moving further to the American occupation in 1920, I believe in 1919, or maybe it was 1912, don't recall the date, but the first Niagara Conference, right, where the Black diaspora got together, I believe the first time in London, and they were discussing, oppression worldwide. And the idea was that any Black person that's oppressed anywhere is a threat to any of us, right? Free or not. So there was this collaboration between African Americans and Haitians from about 1922 to 1929, where they came together, right, to fight against the occupation. But the idea was that we're going to continue to fight against colonialism beyond the occupation.
I think for me, and I don't even know how to usefully add on to all of the amazing ways to think about Toussaint. I see somebody say it again. I think for me, one of the things that sticks out to me about Toussaint's legacy in particular as one of the leaders and one of the icons of the revolution is how complicated it is. And this is, I love what you said, Tasha, about him being an opening, him being a way to move through from free and French to free and Black, that had to happen first. And I think that that's really, really important when we're looking at how revolts and revolutions happen. They do happen bit by bit, person by person, group by group, family by family, plantation by plantation. And there's so much that can go wrong, which is why they're so difficult, right? It's not that, first of all, slavery revolts happened all over, including the African continent. So let's just be clear about that. But so it's not as though Africans and people of African descent are not constantly resisting and constantly engaged in armed revolt. It is also true that there have to be so many things that just lock into place, boom, 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 piece by piece by piece, for us to get to the Haitian Revolution. And he doesn't see the end of it. He dies in a prison in the mountains, and having attempted to do, some might say, take the coalitional work too far. Some might say that. But I think that a better framing is that he did what he used the tools, he used every tool available to him at that time. And he pushed them to the limit. And it did create an opening for others to step in. It also is a lesson for us to think about, when do we recognize the limits of the tools that are available to us and step into another set of tools? Right? And do we recognize it before we're dying in a prison somewhere, having been captured by empire? And if we don't, it is what it is. But how can we learn from that to catch that moment sooner? Because it's very precarious. And it's also very easy for those of us, I'm thinking of literally this moment right now, to be caught up in ego and be caught up in what about me? What about what I can get? I can be the exceptional one. I can wheel and deal with Napoleon. It's going to be me. It's so easy for any of us to get caught in that. And how do we also learn that as a lesson of the humility, the deference to the collective, the deference to the community will get us closer to nationhood and freedom than ego and the opposite.
Thank you all so much for your response to that question. I want to pass it over to Tasha. So Haiti's revolutionary memory has been systematically suppressed, fragmented, and distorted by colonial powers who feared its contagion. Your curatorial work often centers the voices and visions that institutions have marginalized. And so a two-part for you: how does your practice work to preserve and share these suppressed stories of Haitian resistance to current and future generations? And secondly, how do you navigate the tension between bringing Haitian revolutionary history into institutional spaces while maintaining its radical edge and refusing the sanitization that institutions often demand?
So I'll start off referring to the first image that I posted. One of my best friends, Alain Martin, took that photo, and bringing it back to the ancestors again, how I am in conversation with them. And even the history of Haiti, sometimes I'm doing work and it's even suppressed for me, and it just comes out without my knowledge. So when I created that, the American flag using Black hair, synthetic hair, cotton balls, chicken wire, that was a response to the Oompa Loompas' first run at the Oval Office. Okay. Like, I debuted that at the DNC in Philadelphia at that time. And when you hear this rhetoric around Make America Great Again, I was like, well, who the hell did that? And I was like, Black people. And it was a conversation that was happening at the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diaspora Institute that had Haitian artists as well as Dominican artists in conversation with each other. The moderator at the time, Shelley Worrell of I Am Caribbean, was like, girl, I've been doing a lot of research on you and I can't find anything about you being Haitian. And I was like, what the hell is she talking about? Like, I tell everybody. But then what became apparent to me in thinking about the synergy with relationship to the American flag, when the Oompa Loompa was elected, all of the states that would have comprised the Louisiana Purchase were red. And so it was like, even still, we're contributing, even in the worst ways, into the way, like you wouldn't have even had access to that land for you to even voted in had Haiti not defeated Napoleon. Right. And so just thinking about how that work, that legacy showed up in that very visceral way was mind blowing to me. And so when I'm thinking about the ways in which I am bringing that history continuously. Whatever I learn, I immediately share. And it goes back to the other photo with the bowl that that was posted. I titled that piece "The Revolution," and what I did is cut up pieces of the 1801 Constitution as well as the 1805 Constitution of Haiti, and a letter that Toussaint L'Ouverture wrote, and made that bowl with history being present, because we eat the soup every year. I'll speak for myself, I'm first generation. And so there are these traditions that we participate in, and the history is not being passed along. And so I said to myself, well, what would it mean if, as I'm eating the soup, the bowl then becomes a vessel for that history, and I then get to engage with that? And just as simple as reading the constitutions, mind blowing, right? 1805, you have to honor the land. Non-negotiable. 1805, parents can't dishonor their children. Also, you were supposed to have a trade, in order to, like, it was just, if we're talking about foundation, I can't be a proud Haitian if I don't know what foundation I am standing on. And that experience further rooted me in that. And in having that experience, because that project was the culmination of my Haiti Cultural Exchange Fellowship, all of the things we're having, like when you're talking about, Jessica, the revolutions that have constantly been happening, there was a civil war that also happened in the midst of this revolution. Right, Alan, I'm thinking that you took 12 years to do this film, almost the same amount of time as the revolution. So that excavation, that time, that tenderness that is required for us to offer back up our information is imperative. And it's actually really essential to how we get that information out, especially when there are other people who are holding our archives. And to answer your question, the second part of the question, I give zero fucks. Institutions. I am no longer indoctrinated in the ways in which I'm supposed to perform for one's convenience. At this point, 1804 pumps too loudly in my breath, through my veins, that I can quit. No, it's not even, I couldn't, even if I tried, is really much where I am. And so where I really position people is that if an ask comes for me to participate or engage, you have to ask yourself if you're ready for that, because I will not suppress myself. That means don't try to tell me to put the time down. Don't try to tell me to stay seated. Don't try to tell me to be polite. That is just not how I am chewing to show up. Hence why I've self-proclaimed myself a cultural vigilante. I'm not going to be nice with it, right? There is a fire that rages within me. That is the way in which I choose to show up, and that can be attested to that lineage. And what I will surmise that with is I recently went to Senegal, and I visited the rooms in which the enslaved folks who could not be quelled, right, after they've been held and quarantined underneath stairs, after they've been beaten profusely, right, were then sequestered into another room, attached to pillars. In finding that, I was told those who they could not quell were the ones that they sent to Jamaica and Haiti because the land was the hardest to toil. And when you think about the Haitian Revolution, Boukman came from Senegal, Jamaica, then Haiti, who was a part of that voodoo ceremony. And then you have the Haitians who were already there, who had been transported there. And so I will stop there as far as the energy I bring when it comes to these institutions.
Thank you. Wow, thank you. That was me dropping the mic for you. I want to direct this next question to Dr. Johnson. So your scholarship excavates the intimate archives of slavery and resistance, recovering the stories of Black women who are often erased from grand revolutionary narratives, which we are already beautifully transitioning into. And so another two-part, how do you locate the presence of Black women revolutionaries in Haiti stories or the diasporic stories that you tell? How does centering their experiences teach us about the full scope of liberation struggle?
Thank you for that question. One of the things that you learn early on when you're exploring the history of slavery, the experiences of Africans as they're forced into diaspora, is that the ways that gender is created is particularly violent in the experiences of African women and girls, femmes. It is a realization that slavery is built off of the reproductive labor, both like real, actual birthing, and also that what Black women represent, or what birthing bodies represent, in the context of bondage. I think that's something that in some ways a lot of us are really, familiar with, or at least that's one of like the first lessons. I think the thing that becomes really interesting in understanding what the context of slavery is like for African women in a place like Haiti is really appreciating the creativity of violence that has to be enacted in order to silence the resistance that Black women are engaged in. It is to realize and to learn and to, find documents that are about women who are in the fields, who are having to navigate, as a gendered convention, not having access to the skilled labor. So they're treated as women in the sense that they're not allowed to be hunters, coopers, blacksmiths, etc. So there's a policing of gendered lines there, which means that it's harder to have sense of mobility, a sense of where the geography is around you, harder to run away. It doesn't mean people didn't engage in it, but you have these, you begin to really get a sense of, oh, this structure of racism, of sexism, of anti-Blackness, of femphobia is really, really deep and dense. And so encountering these documents where you have slave owners who are laying out, how many, who is in the field and who is not, and how many children are being born, or complaining that there's been a rash of infanticides and they need to blame the midwife, who is also African woman. It really becomes very, very clear that for Black women, there is a lot at stake. And then you get into the annals of revolt, and you see all the different manifestations of revolts, also of being caught up in revolt for those who maybe are on, trying to be on the sidelines. You have stories like Sissi Fatima, who is central to the Boakeman ceremony, central to marshaling both the spiritual and community resources with Boukman, in order to bring that, that 1791 revolt to the fore. You also have women who are, seem like maybe they're in a whole separate place. So Julien Raymond, who is one of the free men of color, who's doing some of the organizing around, like we need to be free in French. We need to, we want to keep our slaves, because there's a cadre of free men of color who want to keep the property. They want the rights of white manhood. They don't want to relinquish their what they understand to be their privilege. But if you trace him back just a few generations, his mother is, a free woman of color she's the reason her try to find the right word for the kind of intimate and complicated and dangerous kind of liaisons that free women of color engage in. But that scenario that she's in basically creates the circumstances for him to exist, right? So you see women in those aspects as well. You see, I think it was Tasha who mentioned Sanité Belair, who is, executed with her husband. The examples are so wide in a way that I find really important for us to understand. There's a whole array of possibilities of how to engage in revolt. And especially for women and girls, there are so many contexts in which if you don't engage in revolt, find some way to be part of this revolution that's happening, this revolution will happen to you, right? You will be caught up in it in some matter. You're not any more exempt than anyone else in this scenario. The precepts of white womanhood don't apply to you. And they understood that. And so you see them in the documents, you see them in the notarial records, you see them in discussions between, and letters that are written back and forth, and the annals and histories that are written afterwards. What's interesting is that you don't see them as much in newspapers, although Marlena Dowd may, if she's listening, she may be the one I would say who would prove me wrong. She has an incredible bibliographic project that goes through Haitian newspapers. But you don't see them as much there. And I think that that's just part of the sanitization of the Haitian Revolution in that moment in general, right? It's not described as that until it's taken up by Haitians themselves to say this was a revolt that changed the world. At the time, it's described as a problem with French Negroes, quote unquote French Negroes, and in that it sort of subsumes Black women as at the bottom of that story. But the work that they engage in and their experiences are incredibly important for us to understand the human dimensions of revolt, the impact it has on you, and again, the threats and dangers that we can learn to navigate around, if we're careful. So if we know that wives and girls are going to be caught up on the peripheries of violence, what are the ways that we're accounting for that in our organizing or in our revolting in this particular moment, right? Like if we know that there are plenty of women who are quite willing to be at the front lines, like Belair was, how are we making sure that women are on the front lines as well, and that they have something, that they are part of the leadership and part of making the strategic choices in the work that we need to do today. And the last thing I'll say is, what are the ways that we're also appreciating that work of mourning and that grief work? So Sissi Fatiman becomes represented as, the icon of the spiritual work of galvanizing energy and galvanizing our readiness for fight. But Défilé is the other side of that in a lot of ways. What does it mean to appreciate that there's a Black woman who is literally picking up the pieces of the Black emperor? And what is that work of also holding onto and picking ourselves up where and when there is the battles are not won, and where and when we need to galvanize ourselves after failure in order to fight again. So there's also some really important aspects there. Tasha already spoke to Loa, so I won't speak to that, but I do want to note that these also have like specific iconography and deity manifestations and spiritual manifestations that are also part of how we can think about Black women in this moment and in moments of revolt.
Thank you so much, and thank you for those necessary questions and yeah, just the beautiful work that you do to unearth those stories. I want to take this next question to Alan. We've been getting a lot of questions about the film, so don't worry, y'all. It's in my question. And so, as the filmmaker and storyteller behind The Forgotten Occupation, you are preserving Haitian memory. You're engaged in what we call memory justice, reclaiming narratives that have been deliberately erased or distorted. And so, one, can you just share more about the film? But also, what strategies did you use to gather, preserve, and activate fragments of Haiti's revolutionary memory that survive in oral traditions, family stories, and community knowledge? And how do you bridge the gap between official archives and living memory? You talked a little bit about that, but would love to hear more.
Yeah, to like 12 years of depression. Um, making this project was really, really challenging only because I came to this project with very little respect for documentary filmmaking as an art form, because documentaries are things that I was introduced to in the classroom. So to me, there were just always tools of academia and tools of education, and I hated being in school. So, but as I worked in this project and started falling in love with it, and I was uncovering so much, and there was so much information I needed to include, I didn't know which way to go about including it effectively, because in the end, film is film, right? The medium of film was invented for entertainment. When you think about the first film ever made, I think it was by the Lumiere brothers. I think it was like a movie about a train. It was like 12 minutes. So I came across this interview from Ava DuVernay, and she was like, when I was making 13, I needed to find a way to keep the audience entertained while communicating some very depressing things about the story. So that was my aha moment, right? So I was then going to use my personal story. So I'm writing a letter to my grandfather, which I think makes the film very engaging, keeps the audience engaged. And to that letter, I'm dropping facts about the brutality of the US occupation, right? And I had my camera crew follow me into the National Archives, right, to show the audience, us and the crew going through the archival photos, going to like the old film collections they have at the archive. So I was able to take all of that. And then plus all the stuff I read. When I was in college, I hated having to do bibliographies. I used to resent my professors for that. But in this project, the bibliographies saved me, right? Because I was coming against a dearth of information in terms of the US occupation, because so many books were out of print, I didn't know where to go. So every book I read, I would read the bibliography, and wherever the author went to look for information, I also went to those places to look for information and brought my camera, right? So the film, it's a combination of cinema verite, the talking head is autobiographical. So being able to mesh that into one piece was not easy. I still can't believe I did it, but that was the process.
Thank you so much. And could you say maybe a little bit more about some of that archival work you did, as well as you were kind of mentioning before, of the different spaces that you went?
Yeah, so we went to the National Archives. The National Archives has the most, I'm not going to say the most, but it has the most available, or I guess accessible, materials concerning the US occupation. So, I spent, a couple of weeks there going to everything that I could possibly go to, because I wanted to have everything. The Schomburg in Harlem was phenomenal. They have this extensive collection of Haitian history I was able to rely on to get this project done. Where else did I go? Columbia Archives. Beinecke Library at Yale University also had this archives on James Weldon Johnson, who went to Haiti. So I went through his personal collection. But the majority of archival materials about the US occupation is in Quantico, Virginia. So when I went to Quantico, Virginia to research the occupation, first of all, people there were very shocked, like, what are you doing here? Nobody cares about this stuff. And he told me himself that there are over 5,000 personal collections of the US occupation in Quantico, but they're all disorganized. They're not put together because of little interest shown in the subject, right? So yeah, and I'm pretty radical in my politics, so it was a little because these archival houses are ran by people who used to be in the service, the armed forces, and all those people usually have right-wing politics. So it felt a little funny, I guess, or a little tense, telling them I'm making this movie that's going to be criticizing the shit out of the U.S. occupation, But I got through it.
We're glad you did. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing those spaces. I'm sure folks are hungry to figure out where to find that history for themselves. So thank you.
Yeah.
And so I also want to pose a question to you, Dred Scott. Your artistic practice, which grapples with revolution as both historical fact and ongoing necessity, from a man was lynched by police yesterday to slave rebellion reenactment, which you shared, can be understood as part of the revolutionary arc that Haiti charted in 1791, as you've mentioned. How do you see your work extending that legacy, if you could say more there? And then how does your practice create art that doesn't just represent resistance, but actively participates in the ongoing project of liberation that Haiti proved was possible? And lastly, how do you create work that doesn't just represent revolution, but participates in building consciousness, revolutionary consciousness, if you will?
Oh, so like real simple questions. First off, I just want to say that it's actually really cool that we're talking about this history, and all of us are actually using archive. And there's an archive that we're interested in going back into because the stories mostly aren't popularly told, and we're actually trying to make this history available more widely. We're trying to understand it, but actually share it with the broader community. And I love that story that's like, well, look, there's this archive that it has all this material, but nobody's interested, so we just like haven't even really cataloged it or something. It's like with the slave rebellion reenactment. I mean, there are parts. I mean, the main history was actually written down by somebody who had personal family history with that revolt, the largest rebellion of enslaved people in U.S. history. People didn't really know anything about it until 1995, when a man named Leon Waters and Albert Thrasher actually self-published a book where they had done the research. But some of the history that they were looking for was in archives that is written in Old French and handwritten, but also some of it had been disappeared. We know that there are certain archives that things had just been disappeared. They couldn't find, and when they actually had better scholars go into it, it isn't there, and we know where it should be. But this history it is there, but we are sort of bearing that history. And I think the question of how to make work that doesn't just sort of represent history, but embodies it and actually helps bring forward revolutionary consciousness. I mean, first off, not all of my work does that. I want to, be clear that I work in a lot of different ways, and some of it is, more traditional in a certain sense. But projects like Slave Rebellion Reenactment really that was a project that was community engaged, and while I was the lead artist in it, it was only successful because there were 350 people who embodied that history, took it up on their own, and it was really a 7-year project. I mean, the public really saw like 2 days of it, but it was a project where some people were literally working on it with me for 7 years, some people maybe only 7 days. But the reenactors, we sort of used the methods which Charles Deland, who was again the main leader of this revolt, he had relative freedom of movement and went from plantation to plantation to recruit people who became his lieutenants, and those people in turn recruited others to be part of this revolt. It was planned for over a year. And I sort of recreated that methodology. I had one-on-one conversations with about 40 people over the course of many years, and those people were responsible for both figuring out who else should participate, keeping the knowledge away from other people, but all that should not know about it, but also finding the people who should and recruiting them in one-on-one conversations. This wasn't organized on the internet. I mean, it was an art project, so there was, public funding. We had websites. We had a, art institution that was supporting and sponsoring it. There was a lot that was coordinated that as an art project, but the bringing people into the army of the enslaved, that was one-on-one conversations, people talking about why this 19th century history matters to people trying to get free today. Why does that history matter to people in the 21st century? And they were, soulful conversations over dinner and stuff like that. And it was really people finding the people who should participate. And so, when Dr. Johnson was talking about, well, this hidden history of women that is written out, particularly the history of enslavement and resistance. Most of the participants in slave rebellion reenactment were women. The people who, I went to said, well, the people who are going to be down with this today, it was mostly young. I mean, historically, most of the people that participate in revolution were young. And so, I wanted to get the 18 to 25-year-old crowd. And a lot of the dudes in that age, they had better stuff to do. They weren't about it. But the women were like, we have to get free. Hell yeah, we got to embody this history. Sign me up. And so, it's skewed about like 70% women, 30% men. Because I wasn't like directing, hey, you got to go find these people. It was like, you talk to your friends, who's down, who's radical, who wants to get free today, who wants to embody this history of freedom and emancipation. And so in that context, it was people really sort of thinking how they could embody this history, learn from it, because not everybody, many people didn't know anything about it, but even those that knew something about it had to learn more about it to do it. And then it was really it was a performance that was for an audience, but it was also for forging an army of the enslaved and people taking those lessons, this lesson of what's the problem, slavery, what's the solution, overthrow the system of enslavement. How does that apply to the present? And so the people that became the army of the enslaved, it was forged over the 2-day really marching in arduous condition because it was wet and cold, which is sort of what we wanted actually. But then they really had formed this radical community, and many of them stayed in community with each other after the project. Many of them didn't know each other before the project, but after, and then they were actually applying those lessons in their daily lives. Some of them changed. They moved. I mean, there's one young woman who moved to Mexico because she wanted to set up a community in a small town. So she moved from a big city in Chicago down to the small community in Mexico to find other people in the African diaspora that were, some of whom were already living in Mexico, and set up an intentional community to basically figure out how to get free. And other people. I mean, a lot of you saw one of the scenes that we had these people firing these old muskets and stuff like that. But everybody that was part of slave rebellion reenactment had some sort of, weapon. They were either a sickle, a machete, cane knife, a knife, whatever. I mean, everybody had some sort of weapon. And that question was a very big question, particularly for the women. Many women had had violence used against them, but the actual thing of like, oh, we can actually wield violence and including learn how to shoot guns. That was actually very liberatory, and it ruptured a dam for a lot of women, and it was like this was really great. And it's not to say that it's not to say that like the new Black Panther Party is like a cadre of 10,000 women that are waiting in the wings to seize power. That's not where things are at, but it is actually sort of we're violence, which is the foundation of this society, could be something that the people, oppressed people, could take up and say, okay, this does not have to be something that is degrading and oppressing me. This is something that, in some cases, I can wield to be part of emancipation. And so, that's not the only violence isn't the only question, but the whole question of like getting beyond the bounds of today, including the nations and social relations and economic relations. Those are things that are very much in Haiti and very much in this 1811 revolt and very much in my thinking when I want people to like see, look, let's rupture out of the current present, let's go to a different future, and what lessons can we draw on to do that, and trying to have the work pose questions, including very particularly for the United States. I mean, some of my work, you saw Imagine a World Without America and what is the proper way to display a U.S. flag. It is actually posing, do we need to get rid of America? Which that's a touchstone question now. I mean, for people getting free, regardless of how you conceive of that, through an armed revolution, through, just taking power in some other way, whatever. But as long as America, the capitalist imperialist country of America, has been in existence, it's a country that was founded on slavery and genocide. And to this day, it continues to exploit and oppress people globally and is becoming fascist. And it is a nightmare and a terror. And my projects get people to rethink the bounds of how change happens.
Ooh, dropping the mic for everybody. Thank you so much. This conversation has been so juicy. And as always, want to try to squeeze in some questions from the audience. And so I think there's a way that I can combine a few things that have been asked. Gabrielle asked, hinging this on your question, Gabrielle, what does it look like to practice a radical solidarity with the Haitian people in this current moment? How can the current moment be an impetus for diasporic solidarity as we struggle against the totality of anti-Blackness? And so I'd also asked, we had questions around like resources, books, things that people can read, thinking about not being able to go to Haiti. So like, how can we be in solidarity? And so just across the spectrum here of how do we think about this current moment? Are there resources people can turn to? How are you thinking in relationship around radical solidarity with Haiti and across the diaspora? Big question for a few minutes left, but
Okay, so what I can offer is, oh, Alan, did you want to go?
No, I just was gonna say, just watch my documentary. You know, that's the place to start.
Epidacet. To add on to Alan's offering, I would say with regard to the solidarity, just reminding folks that freedom was a global project for Haiti, right? It wasn't just everyone who came to Haiti was free. It was like, I'm going to send aid and finances to Venezuela, Ecuador, you know, like the Grand Colombian flag flew in Jacmel, you know, like a sovereignty within a sovereignty, you know, like understanding that it was never just about Haiti. And in thinking that, you know, that there's a misconception around Dessalines too, killing all white people. There's actually a town in North Haiti that there are Polish descendants, right? Polish and German people, as long as they fought for freedom and independence, they were like, listen, but you gotta be Black. Understand, you gotta be Black. Just gotta be Black, right? So again, freedom was for all, and even being exhausted and not able to like offer aid, but recognizing Greece as a nation first, right? So there are all of these examples in which Haiti was like, irrespective of race, like freedom is the core project, the core aspiration. That is what I'm using as a tool for solidarity. And as far as resources, I know a lot of people may be familiar with the Black Jacobin, but there's a book called The Irritated Genie by Jacob Carruthers that changed my life. As we are thinking about this plight for freedom and liberation, what is the compromise and the cost of that compromise? And that offering in the text really helps me to like really engage with like, what are the ways in which I am compromising when the ask is for freedom? So I'll just offer those.
And last thing, if no one else wants to jump in on that question, is what are ways that people can follow, support your work? Are there upcoming projects you want the folks to know about before we start to wrap things up?
I can jump in there because it bridges to the last question. I'd mentioned a bunch of different authors, writers, etc., who are thinking about the archive, this particular archive, and trying to bring some of these stories and sources out. Two books that I can think of that folks might be interested in: Crystal Eden's Rituals, Rebels, and Repertoires. Or maybe that's one of her articles, but she has an amazing book on the Haitian Revolution that goes from the context of Congo and Senegambia over to Saint Domingue, and the influence of that in creating the conditions for warriorship in the Haitian Revolution. And Marlena Doubt is a writing ass writer. She has a book, another book right now. She has a book on Christophe. She has amazing work, really dense, rich work that has a ton of material, a ton of sources, so that you also can look at the material that's written and judge for yourself, learn for yourself. I I have a book, Wicked Flesh, Black Women, Intimacy, and Freedom in the Atlantic World, that is available for purchase. I am finishing up another book on history, slavery, and the digital that will be out hopefully sometime next year. And I try and write on a regular clip and throw a lot of thoughts out there. And I'll try and throw more resources that I might have mentioned there as well at kitchentablehistory.blog. But I am really excited to link up with whoever is interested, including everybody on this panel, who might be trying to think about archives. I didn't talk a lot about my digital work, but one of the things that we also are trying to do across the lab that I direct, Life Code Digital Humanities Against Enclosure, is create, make sure resources end up online, accessible, available for folks to either use to teach with, use to create art with, use to learn from, use it at the kitchen table with their families, whatever that might be. So looking forward to linking with folks. And I also want to say huge thank you to Kinfolk Tech, huge thank you to all of the panelists here. I have learned so much, and it's just really beautiful to spend this day with y'all. I appreciate it.
Yes, I just have one offering, and I'll put the link in the chat. I've been asked to be a guest editor for the 45th issue of Mosaic Magazine through the Literary Freedom Project, which the founder is Ron Kavanaugh. It's the third part of a culmination of events that were in honor of Haiti through Talk Passe Haiti. And so that open call is for anyone of African descent who wants to contribute some writing, poems, text, prose, and from a visual artist. The theme is around Haiti, spirals, and or spiralism, which is a genre specific to the Haitian people. That came to fruition in the 1960s, thanks to Frank Etienne as the main author of that work during the Duvalier regime. And so I want to honor, if she's still in the room, Winnie L'Amour for introducing me to spiralism. She has planted the seed, and now I am sharing that with everybody. Thank you.
I guess for me, if you want to follow me, I do Instagram. I'm at Dred Scott Art, DreadScottArt. I'm also a dinosaur. I'm old. I got a lot of gray hair, and so I do like mailing lists on like email. So if you get down with that, you can go to my website, dreadscott.net, and sign up for my mailing list. And if you want to support in other ways, I make objects, you can buy my art. You can do that through Kristen Tierney Gallery. And that's, I'll put the gallery name in the chat. So if you're really interested in that.
Well, and that's for me. Just want to remind everybody that usually streaming is where movies go to die. Like, we refer to streaming as a graveyard of films. So please, my beautiful peoples, I need y'all to not let me perish in the algorithm of Silicon Valley. All right? Go to Apple, go to YouTube, buy my movie. It's like $7 or $10. Right? I'm trying to get 100,000 people to buy it, not because I'm going to make any money. I'm not. It's all going to the distributor, but to be able to show that we have the numbers to make a follow-up project to this, So that's it. Thank you. I'm on Apple, YouTube, Canopy, and some other platforms, around 80 countries. So
We got you. We're going to run it up.
word.
I want to thank everybody. I want to be respectful of time, but I want to thank each of our panelists so much for holding such a dynamic, fruitful conversation. I know we scratched so many surfaces and we could have kept going, I think, for many more hours. But just thank y'all again for being available to this conversation, and for everybody joining, for putting resources in the chat, for lifting up each of our panelists. This was the first in our series, The People's Archive. So we will have one every other month. We have a stellar lineup, as you saw here, that will continue to be with us for each of these sessions. So continue to follow our work, Kinfolk Tech, on Instagram, as well as our newsletter and our Luma for our events. We can go to the next slide right quick. Thank you so much. This is a QR code to help you download the Kinfolk app, which is available for free on iOS and Android. So you saw the Toussaint L'Ouverture monument at the top of this program. This is a way to access that. It's also available in your app store. So I invite you to engage more deeply with the monuments. We have so many monuments to different historical figures and tributes to artists' work and to our communities. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, we are a nonprofit, and so always looking for feedback. We gotta tell them people how we did. If you loved it, please let us know. And also always looking to improve, as well as we accept donations. So let's keep this thing going. Appreciate everyone again for being here for this evening. I don't think I have any more slides, but please take a moment to just open up the survey and appreciate everyone spending this time with us. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you were here this evening or this afternoon or this morning, so thank you again. We did record. We're on YouTube, so you could find this recording there, and we'll share more on our social media. Thank you all, everyone, again, and go off and enjoy the rest of your day, your week, and whatever that looks like.
Good night, everyone.
Y'all, thank you.